Every organization has a strategic plan that is, frankly, set up to fail. You spend months drafting it, the team gets excited in January, and then without fail, that beautifully bound document starts gathering dust.
The energy just vanishes.
It vanishes.
Yeah.
And the plan is basically irrelevant by mid-March.
Yeah.
If you, the listener, are responsible for strategy or budget or execution, you know this painful cycle all too well.
Well, it's more than just painful. It's incredibly expensive.
Right.
That failure represents wasted resources, misallocated talent, and ultimately a direct hit to your profitability.
Because you're chasing the wrong things.
Exactly. You're pursuing low-value initiatives while the really high ROI projects just languish. So our focus today is hyper-specific.
Okay.
How do you stop that vicious cycle? How do you transform annual planning from this, administrative chore into a ruthless mechanism for selecting the winners and, just as importantly, aggressively eliminating the losers?
That is the mission.
Yeah.
And we have a seriously comprehensive stack of sources here.
We do.
This isn't just academic theory. We're looking at the operational blueprints used by high-growth companies. We're drawing on proprietary frameworks like L4 forecasting, the multi-layered slingshot planning method.
And deep insights into that organizational quicksand that trips everyone up.
Yes, and plus a whole suite of prioritization models, everything from the high-rigor weighted scoring model all the way to the simple clarity of the Eisenhower matrix.
We're basically trying to create a practical path forward. The material really outlines 4 essential steps.
Okay, what are they?
First, you absolutely must confront and diagnose reality.
No more wishful thinking.
None. Second, you have to structure your ambition across different time horizons. Third, prioritize ruthlessly using objective data. And finally, and this is key, sustain the execution by changing your systems and, crucially, changing yourself.
You know, that last point threads through all these sources, and it's where the personal stakes get really high. The biggest game changer isn't just adopting some new framework. It's understanding when and why you need to personally change, to shed old habits and step into the role of the new you to meet that new ambition.
It's the leadership lid.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this blueprint, starting with that unvarnished truth about why most plans fail.
So we have to start with a pretty sobering truth. One of our sources noted that 61% of C-suite executives openly admit their business struggles severely to bridge the gap between strategy formulation,
The great ideas on the whiteboard.
and the day-to-day implementation. The goals are aspirational, but the actual work people do every day doesn't change to meet them. The strategy just becomes a ghost haunting the organization.
And that ghost usually shows up because of the first, most fundamental planning pitfall, what the sources call blinded optimism.
Right.
As leaders, we're inherently optimistic. We have to be. We look at last year's numbers, which maybe saw a decent 8% growth, and we instinctively drag a 10% or 15% growth rate across the next 12 months in a spreadsheet.
That is the old way. And the sources call it out as statistically useless. It's forecasting by hope.
Yeah, you're throwing a dart in a dark room and praying it hits the bullseye.
And that kind of basic forecasting, it completely fails to illuminate the fundamental problem, the strategic gap. It just assumes your existing capacity and your existing momentum can magically produce more output.
So, if the old way is completely broken, what's the objective measure we can trust? Something that strips away that layer of hope and just forces us to be honest.
This is where we turn to the L4 forecasting framework, or the last 4 months.
The last 4 months.
The premise is deceptively simple, but it is incredibly powerful. The average performance of your key metric over the last 4 months is the single best, most objective predictor of your immediate future performance.
Why is that?
Because it captures everything that's real right now. The current organizational momentum, the existing team capacity, the established market conditions. It captures that reality better than any aspirational percentage bump ever could.
I love the simplicity of that. It's a reality check that works across any department, not just for high-level revenue.
Oh, absolutely.
You can apply L4 to your conversion rates, to average order value, to the number of sales opportunities your team creates each month.
Or even internal metrics. I've seen it used for customer support response time or the efficiency of a procurement process, anything you can measure.
So let's walk through the mechanics, because I think this is where it gets really practical.
Okay, so let's say you're sitting in December planning for the new year.
Okay.
You take the average revenue from September, October, November, and December.
Your L4.
That average becomes your realistic baseline projection for the next year if no strategic changes are made. That's the critical part. This is your do-nothing trajectory.
Now, a quick caveat the sources bring up is seasonality.
A huge one.
Right. For a DTC brand, October and November might be massive because of holiday shopping. For a B2B SaaS company, December might be a total ghost town.
Exactly. So you have to normalize for that. You plot the L4 average across the next 12 months, and then you adjust those trend lines based on known seasonal factors. But here's the key. The L4 average itself doesn't lie.
It's the starting point.
It's the truth. If your existing capacity is only producing X amount per month, you have to accept X as your starting point. You can't pretend it's Y.
And the beauty of L4 is that it creates this continuous accountability. The sources recommend reforecasting every couple of months.
Yes.
So if it's now March, you look at December through March. Is the new L4 average higher or lower than your initial projection? If it's lower, you have an immediate data-driven trigger that says, hey, we are slipping and we need to course correct now.
It completely eliminates that end of Q1 surprise where everyone looks around and says, what happened?
We're already behind plan. Hashtag 1.2. Recognizing and addressing the strategic gap.
The L4 framework is essentially the mechanism that reveals the strategic gap. And that gap is the heart of true strategic thinking. Let's use that revenue example we were talking about.
Okay, so let's say the board or the CEO demands $15 million in revenue for the year. That's the aspiration.
That's the big number on the wall.
But you run the L4 forecast, and it objectively predicts, based on current momentum, that you're on track for only $12 million.
You now have a concrete $3 million gap.
It's not theoretical anymore.
No, it's a strategic mandate. You cannot wish that $3 million away. Leadership must immediately step up and answer. Where specifically is that additional $3 million coming from?
This is where the planning process moves from just projection to actual strategic work. It forces really tough choices.
Absolutely. Is that $3 million coming from conversion rate optimization?
Or a new product line.
Or maybe aggressive spending in a marketing channel you've been neglecting, like paid social?
Or what about increasing average order value AOV by focusing on bundles and upgrades?
Every single dollar of that $3 million gap has to be linked to a concrete strategic initiative, which, as we'll get into, are what we call the rocks. If you can't define the strategies and the required investment to close that gap, then the $15 million goal is not a goal, it's a fantasy.
And this level of honesty requires some serious preparation and self-reflection. Which brings us to the need for upfront analysis, things like clarity breaks and a really strong SWOT analysis.
Successful planning sessions are never rushed. They demand pre-work.
Right.
And this concept of clarity breaks is essential. Leaders have to intentionally block off time to step away from the operational churn, just reflect on the business, and dream a little about possibilities without the tyranny of the immediate.
They need to be ready to work on the business, not just in it.
That's the perfect way to put it. And that reflection feeds directly into the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
The sources are really adamant about this.
Yeah.
You must conduct the SWOT before you define the grand vision.
That sequence is absolutely critical for alignment and for realism. Think about it. If your aspirational vision relies heavily on an existing weakness.
Like, we will dominate the global market by having the most efficient supply chain.
Right, when your current supply chain is a recognized, documented weakness. You're building your entire house on sand.
The SWOT analysis sets that foundation of reality. It sets the internal expectations.
It does. If the team recognizes that a major competitor has a strength in a key area, or that a regulatory threat is looming on the horizon, they understand that the path forward has to be designed to mitigate those things or leverage existing strengths.
It prevents the team from pursuing goals that are just fundamentally impossible, given the current landscape.
So, in essence, the entire diagnostic foundation is about achieving objective truths.
There's two kinds of truth.
First, the L4 forecast, which is the number, and then the SWOT analysis, which is the context around the number. You have to start with that objective truth before you can define the aspiration. Without that diagnostic shock, the whole planning process is doomed to fail.
Okay, so we've identified the gap. We know the objective truth. We're ready to move from diagnosis to actually defining our ambition.
Setting the course.
Exactly. And this is where the planning process needs structure. Our sources call this slingshot planning a hierarchy that starts massive. It gets more and more granular. It's structured like a set of nested Russian dolls.
I like that analogy. And the structure isn't just academic, it's purely functional. It's designed to ensure that the lowest level action item, the one being executed by a junior team member, is consciously connected all the way up to the highest level existential purpose of the organization.
So let's start at the very top, the vision, or the 25-year target. This has to be inspirational and descriptive.
It's not just a number.
No. It's about describing the future world you want to create through your company's sustained effort.
I think the best definition I saw in the sources was to imagine a reputable outlet like the New York Times or maybe Wired magazine writing a feature about your company 25 years from now.
Oh, that's good.
What specific impact has your product or your service had on the industry or the environment or just the daily lives of your customers? That narrative has to be rich and aspirational.
Then you dial that back to the 10-year target. This is the overarching goal, and it has to be strategically enormous.
And there's a very specific reason for that, right?
Yeah, the sources say the goal has to be big enough so that every single team member's personal, massive aspirations, their desired career trajectory, their financial goals, their desire for impact can be achieved under the umbrella of the company's success.
Because if the company's vision is too small, your best talent will outgrow it and leave.
They'll find a bigger umbrella.
Exactly. Next down is the 3-year goal. This becomes much more quantitative and descriptive.
Okay.
Now you need to define the physical manifestation of the business. What's the head count? What is the exact revenue and profit target? What key measurable achievements have you locked in?
Like having a global footprint, or speaking at 15 major industry events, or securing 3 key strategic partnerships.
It's the visual blueprint of the near future.
And then finally, you get to the 1-year plan. This is the detail work. This provides the specific metrics, exact revenue, profit targets, and most importantly, the main rocks, the big strategic projects required to achieve that slice of the 3-year vision. This is where the rubber meets the road. Hashtag Tax Tape 2.2 goals, strategies, and the power of the rock analogy.
We really need to nail the terminology here because confusion between goals, strategies, and actions is often what causes teams to just aimlessly execute.
Just churn, right?
Total churn. We're referencing the distinctions laid out in a foundational personal goal-setting workbook here.
Okay, let's define them precisely then. The goal is the desired result. Simple, measurable, it identifies the destination.
Like increase annual recurring revenue to $15 million by the end of Q4.
Perfect, then you have the strategy. This is the method or plan you execute to achieve that goal.
These are the rocks.
The rocks.
Rocks are large, complex, often cross-functional projects. They are the specific mechanisms that will close that strategic gap we identified back in part 1.
So an example would be roll out a new high-value tiered subscription service.
Or integrate AI automation across all our customer support channels. Big, meaty projects.
And finally, the action items. These are the specific, prioritized to-dos necessary for a strategy for a rock to be achieved.
And they must be assigned to a single individual, tracked granularly, and this is crucial, they should be evaluated and adjusted every 90 days.
You can't map out every single to-do for an entire year.
No, but you can for a quarter.
This brings us to probably the most powerful analogy in all the source material. The rocks, pebbles, and sand framework.
I love this one. Imagine you're trying to fill a container with these 3 elements. The sequence matters more than anything else.
And if you do what most people do, you start with the sand.
Right.
The sand represents the daily minutia, the reactive emails, the constant Slack pings, the low-value distractions that feel really urgent but aren't actually important.
And if you prioritize the sand first, it fills the entire vase. There's no room left.
And then, when you try to put in the rocks, those big strategic initiatives like launching that new subscription service,
they won't fit. The space is gone. Your time, your energy, your resources have all been consumed by low-impact activity.
So strategic discipline dictates you have to start with the rocks. These are the 3 to 7 most important strategic initiatives for the quarter.
And once those rocks are scheduled and budgeted and assigned, they determine the very structure of your time. They force the entire organization to prioritize.
Next come the pebbles. These are necessary activities, but they aren't the primary drivers of growth.
Think of them as crucial maintenance.
Like one-on-ones, mandatory performance reviews, regularly scheduled team meetings, foundational reporting.
They fall into the spaces between the protected rocks.
And only then does the sand fill whatever remaining open time is left. The unexpected things that crop up during the week that need immediate, but often low-impact attention.
By putting the rocks in first, you're building these protective boundaries around the work that actually matters most.
To solidify accountability, The sources recommend breaking down the big goals, the one-year plan using these rocks, or maybe a system like OKRs.
And furthermore, to manage expectations, especially around that big financial goal, it's highly valuable to define a good, better, best plan for your key metrics.
What's an example of that?
So if your target revenue is $15 million, your good might be $13.5 million, so a respectable 10% under target, and best might be $16.5 million, an overperformance.
So it creates a performance spectrum that manages the pressure.
Exactly. It allows the executive team to measure success even if the absolute target is missed. It stops the team from declaring total failure if they hit $14.9 million, you know?
That makes sense.
And the final output of this entire hierarchy, the vision, the mission, the values, the goals, the core strategies or rocks, all of this needs to be consolidated into a clear, visually digestible, nice one-page visual.
This isn't just about making it look pretty. It's about tactical utility.
Absolutely not. That one-pager should be the single source of truth that leaders review every single day, maybe at the start of their weekly check-in.
So if you ask a department leader, hey, what are we doing this quarter? They shouldn't have to scroll through some 50-page document.
No, they should be able to instantly recall the three main rocks because they see them every single morning. That visual clarity is what makes the strategy truly actionable.
Okay, so we've grounded ourselves in that L4 reality. We've defined our strategic path of the slingshot. Now we hit the execution phase.
And this is where most plans meet the political quicksand of bureaucracy and organizational drag.
It's true. Even a brilliant strategy will fail if you can't ruthlessly select the high ROI projects and just cut the dead weight.
So we need to review the 5 most common planning pitfalls that derail execution, because they represent the organizational friction you absolutely have to overcome.
Right. Pitfall number 1, overloaded priorities. This is when the executive team hasn't done the painful work of saying no. Everything is listed as important.
And when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. It just leads to resource dilution, burnout, and decision paralysis among the functional teams.
The fix is the discipline we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You have to focus only on the 3 to 7 most important company goals, the strategically significant rocks.
That discipline forces leaders to make painful cuts, which is absolutely necessary for focus.
Pitfall number 2, lack of accountability. Projects stall not because of incompetence, but because of nebulous ownership.
It's always the team's fault.
Exactly. Goals assigned to marketing or product development lead to delays, diffused responsibility, and just a lot of finger-pointing when the deadline approaches.
The fix here is non-negotiable. Every rock and every single action item needs a single named owner.
One person.
One person. The sources emphasize using an accountability chart to clarify roles. There must be one person responsible for the outcome, no matter how complex the project is. You have to stop that founder who wants to assign the rock to the team because they want the credit but not the responsibility.
Yeah, that's a classic. Okay, pitfall number 3. Not using data to drive decisions. This is the reliance on instinct, gut feeling.
Or the charisma of the loudest person in the room.
Yes. And it's a huge resource killer. This is how pet projects that deliver absolutely no value get funded year after year.
The fix is building a consistent scorecard. You have to agree up front on the measurable metrics that define success for each rock, and then you have to track them relentlessly. Data removes the subjectivity and reveals trends, ensuring your expensive strategies are validated by hard numbers, not just educated guesses.
Pitfall number 4, no follow-through system. This is the death of the Q1 plan.
The slow fade.
That initial planning energy fades, and the whole organization just reverts to reactive mode chasing the sand, not the rocks.
You need a system that institutionalizes the strategy. So the fix is embedding your priorities directly into your weekly check-ins and your meeting tools. The first question in every meeting should be, how are we tracking against the quarterly rocks?
The strategy has to be a continuous conversation, not just an annual event.
Exactly.
And the final one, explicitly called out by our PMO sources, pitfall number 5. Focusing on outputs versus outcomes.
This one is huge.
We so often pat ourselves on the back for delivering a project on time and on budget. That's the output, without asking the far more critical question.
Did we achieve the targeted business improvement? That's the outcome. That's the ROI. A $1 million project delivered on time is still a strategic failure if the resulting business value is only $100,000.
It failed to move the business forward.
Right. Strategy is about generating value, and the true measure of a project is the outcome, the ROI, the increased customer satisfaction, the reduction in costs, not just the successful completion of a checklist. Hashtag 3.2 frameworks for objective prioritization and resource allocation.
So to combat all of these pitfalls and eliminate the low-value work, prioritization has to be systematic.
It has to be.
And before you even use any framework, you have to establish clear, agreed-upon criteria: ROI, user satisfaction, level of effort, risk, resource availability.
The rules of the game.
Exactly. We'll focus deeply on two frameworks that provide the maximum rigor and value for big strategic decisions. First, the most comprehensive approach, the weighted scoring model.
This moves you so far beyond simple gut checks. It's a method where strategic projects are scored, usually on a 0 to 10 scale, against multiple criteria.
So what's an example?
There is a university client in the sources that scored projects against business value, which was measured by enrollment impact, customer impact, project length, business risk, and required resources.
And the weighted part is what makes it so powerful for strategic alignment, right?
Yeah, the magic. You determine the importance or the weight of each criterion before you start scoring. So if the organization is in a lean year where resource constraint is the primary threat, you might weight the resources category at 40% and business value at 30%.
And that ensures that even a really high-value project that just consumes too many resources is ranked lower than a moderate-value project that's resource efficient.
It maintains objectivity against that political quicksand. When the loud voice in the room insists their pet project is vital, the weighted score is the objective arbiter that says, we understand the enthusiasm, but the numbers show it fails on resource efficiency and risk, so it ranks 15th, not 3rd.
It takes the emotion out of it.
It does. The second core framework is simple yet profound. The Eisenhower matrix, or urgent versus important.
Classic.
It is, and for good reason. This 2x2 matrix is fundamentally a discipline tool. It guides decision-making about how leaders spend their time and allocate their effort. It forces teams to stop conflating urgency, what is screaming for attention right now, with importance, what actually drives the long-term strategic goals we defined in the slingshot.
Okay, so you have 4 quadrants.
Right. Tasks that are urgent and important must be done. Now, these are crises, critical deadlines.
The fires.
The fires, tasks that are important and not urgent. This is the sweet spot. This is where your long-term strategic planning and all your core rocks live. These must be rigorously scheduled and protected.
And the bottom row is where the power is. Urgent and not important tasks, like many administrative approvals, low-impact meetings, or unnecessary email chains, should be delegated. This frees up leadership time for the important work.
And the ultimate act of strategic discipline, which directly addresses our mission of eliminating low-value work, is the not important and not urgent quadrant. These tasks must be explicitly deleted from the organization's to-do list.
If you can't name the tasks you are deleting, you haven't done the hard work of prioritization.
You haven't. And we should quickly mention a couple other valuable frameworks for specific scenarios.
Okay.
For defining scope, particularly for product teams, the Moscow method is excellent.
Must have, should have, could have, and.
And most importantly, won't have. That won't have bucket is where you manage expectations and you prevent scope creep. It is the explicit cut list. You communicate to stakeholders exactly what you are not building this period.
And for a quick visual assessment, there's the value versus effort matrix.
Super handy. High-value, low-effort projects are your quick wins, the low-hanging fruit. High-value, high-effort are the big projects. But the one to avoid is the time sink. Low-value, high-effort.
Those are the projects that just suck resources and deliver nothing.
And they must be the first things cut in your strategic pruning. Hashtag 3.3, the PMO's role in strategic prioritization.
All of this objective rigor, it really requires an objective referee. And that, according to our sources, is the PMO, the Project Management Office.
Yes, the sources refer to the PMO as the value orchestrator. They're the single most effective link between that high-level strategy and the on-the-ground operational execution.
And the PMO's unique value is its holistic view. They don't just evaluate Project A in isolation. They evaluate projects as part of a complete portfolio. Why is that so crucial?
Because evaluating a project in a vacuum misses all the dependencies, all the resource conflicts, and all the collaboration opportunities that exist across the organization.
Give me an example.
The PMO sees that 2 different departments are planning 2 separate projects that require the same 3 developers and the same budget allocation. Only that holistic portfolio view can reveal that fundamental constraint.
And that perspective allows the PMO to enforce data-driven, objective decisions.
Right. They design and they manage the weighted scoring model, ensuring that measurable criteria like financial return, risk reduction, resource consumption are balanced against those harder-to-measure qualitative factors like long-term brand building. They are the shield against personal preferences and political agendas.
They also facilitate scenario planning.
This is a really powerful tool. Instead of just presenting the executive team with one go plan, the PMO presents multiple portfolio options.
So like,
Option A might be low risk, high efficiency. Option B might be high risk, high growth. Option C might be balanced. And the question posed to the decision makers is, given our current capacity and market conditions, which portfolio option maximizes our business impact toward the one-year goal?
the PMO also plays a critical role in budgeting. They advocate for shifting away from rigid, traditional annual allocations.
Toward value-based funding and what's called rolling wave budgeting.
What's that?
Traditional annual budgeting often forces you to fund a project for the whole year, even if it stalls out in Q2.
The money's already committed.
Right. Rolling wave budgeting, on the other hand, maintains financial agility by providing incremental funding based on milestone achievement. So if Project A fails to hit its first major deliverable, the funding for the next wave is stopped, and that capital is immediately redirected to Project B, which is showing higher value and more momentum.
So it ensures that your capital is continuously flowing toward the initiatives with the highest potential return.
Always.
Okay, so the plan is built, the portfolio is prioritized, and the high-value rocks are selected and funded. But the strategy doesn't execute itself.
Not at all.
We have to talk about the systems needed for continuous progress and the necessary shift in the leadership mindset itself.
This is where we take the concept of the rocks and apply it to a leader's most precious resource, their time. The sources advocate for the preloaded year, or what some people call the big-ass calendar.
The big-ass calendar. I like that.
It means planning your entire next year in December or January.
And this concept of the preloaded year is the antidote to the sand filling the vase.
It is. You are intentionally carving out time for what drives growth, personally and professionally, before any urgent demand can consume it.
You block the rocks first. This includes known events like company retreats, key product launch windows, family dates, necessary vacations.
But it also includes deep work. The sources detail examples of founders dedicating entire production days, say every Wednesday, to focused, deep work like writing or coding or planning.
And making them completely off limits for interruptions or recurring administrative meetings.
Right. This discipline ties directly to that powerful quote, "You don't need to tell me what your priorities are. I can look at your calendar and your calendar will tell me what your priorities are."
Your schedule is the ultimate scorecard of your strategic intent. If your calendar is filled with sand and pebbles, you are not focused on the rocks, period.
And while you preload the year for the big rocks, the actual execution operates in what's called the 90-day world.
Right.
Goals are year-long, but the strategies and the action items, the to-dos, must be reevaluated every quarter. This 90-day cycle is the necessary operational link back to the L4 forecast.
So if your L4 reality changes in March, you adjust the action items for the next 90 days. It keeps you agile.
It maintains manageability and agility for course correction. Hashtag 4.2, the new you, breaking habits for success.
Now we get to what might be the most profound and often overlooked element of strategic planning. And it's why that strategy document often dies in Q1. If you are aiming for massive gap-closing goals, the person you were last year, the leader with the existing habits and the existing comfort zone, is simply not the person capable of achieving those stretch targets.
This is John Maxwell's law of the lid. Your personal growth, your current capabilities, and your ingrained habits. They form a lid over your organization's potential.
So if you don't grow past that lid,
the company will stagnate. Achieving a goal that demands a $3 million strategic gap closure requires fundamental personal change. You have to be willing to intentionally break old habits.
And this requires a high degree of self-awareness and, critically, the courage to reset expectations with your team.
Yes. The sources provide really clear anecdotes about how difficult this is, even for successful founders.
Like what?
There's the example of the successful founder who is known for his accessibility. He was involved in every customer success meeting. He responded to almost every Slack channel ping.
That sounds familiar.
And those activities were comforting outputs, but they completely limited his ability to tackle the big new strategic initiatives, the rocks, that required deep focus and creative energy. He was stuck in the sand.
So what did you do?
He had to make a public communication. He had to say, I know for years I was the operational support, but to hit our ambitious goals and close the strategic gap, I must step away from those operational loops. I will no longer be in those meetings, and you must manage without me.
That's a hard conversation.
It's a huge decision, and it caused discomfort because the team was used to the old version of the leader. People you've worked with for years still hold expectations based on the person you were 6 years ago, grinding it out in the trenches.
You are essentially doing personal pruning. Just as you strategically delete time sinks and low-value projects from the company portfolio, you have to explicitly delegate or delete personal habits and commitments that drain your focus.
And communicating this change, this new you, is one of the most significant game changers cited in the sources for setting the entire company up for success. Hashtag 4.3, achieving sustainable strategic alignment.
Finally, let's look at the organizational structure required to maintain that strategic alignment.
Right, how do you keep it going?
How do you ensure continuous movement and prevent the strategy from becoming just another siloed document? The sources outline 4 crucial organizational dimensions that integrate strategy.
The 4 dimensions are process, governance, performance management, and technology and data. And ignoring any one of these dimensions guarantees friction.
Okay, let's start with process. This is about achieving integration.
This means linking your strategic plans directly with your financial planning and your operational execution plans. They can't exist in separate spreadsheets or in separate departments. They have to flow together.
So, for instance, the financial forecast, the L4 projection, must directly inform how you allocate capital in the strategic plan for the rocks.
Precisely. Next is governance. This is about leadership commitment and structure. This means ensuring strong, cross-functional involvement at the decision-making level.
You have to have the right people in the room.
Yes. Risk management and long-term trends, be they market or regulatory, have to be integral to board-level governance, not just separate ad hoc discussions. It's about defining who has the authority to approve a new rock and who is accountable for its failure.
Then there's performance management. This ensures the entire organization is incentivized to actually chase the strategy.
Right. This means aligning employee objectives, their targets, and their compensation, including short and long-term incentive plans, with the core strategic targets.
So if the company rock is increase AOV by 20%, then the sales team's incentive structure must reflect that exact metric.
It has to. You must track the benefits and costs of initiatives to prove alignment and value delivery.
We see a great example of this rigor in the GSA, the General Services Administration goals that were cited, which were focused entirely on efficiency.
Their strategic goal to embrace GSA's model of efficiency for ourselves involves streamlining procurement and rationalizing IT infrastructure.
And their performance indicators are relentlessly simple.
They are percentage reduction in IT spend and total operating costs as a percentage of goods and services provided. They are measuring efficiency as the ultimate strategic deliverable.
Finally, the dimension of technology and data. This means ruthlessly moving away from data that's retained manually in siloed spreadsheets.
The classic organizational blocker.
And defining clear data requirements for materiality, frequency, and accuracy.
The critical need here is for IT systems to fully support integration and cross-business access. Whether you use integrated ERP modules or dedicated planning platforms, information must reside on central systems that allow real-time monitoring of performance against your rocks.
This prevents that classic scenario where a team is running on strategic data that is 3 months old,
which guarantees they will be out of alignment with the market reality.
Ultimately, the sources all agree. Strategic planning is not a fixed annual event. It's an incremental and iterative process.
You have to build in regular, often quarterly review cycles. You have to track your KPIs and establish clear, institutionalized feedback loops that allow you to adapt your plan immediately as market conditions or your L4 reality changes. Hashtag outro me.
You know, we've engineered a really comprehensive path today. We moved from that necessary cold water shock of the L4 forecasting, which confronts blinded optimism with objective truth, to structuring our ambition via the vision and the rocks hierarchy. And then we moved into the critical discipline of selecting the highest value work, using objective prioritization frameworks like the weighted scoring model to shield our resources from political influence and organizational drag.
The fundamental insight woven through all of these frameworks is just focused effort and the relentless pruning of low-value activity.
Yeah.
Strategic planning is about using data to find the strategic gap and then implementing systems from the big-ass calendar to the PMO to relentlessly delegate or delete everything, project or habit, that does not contribute directly to closing that gap and fulfilling the core mission.
It's that disciplined, structured approach that's the difference between mere aspirations and measurable, sustainable, high ROI outcomes.
That's it.
And that leads us to a final provocative question for you, the listener. to carry into your next planning cycle. You now know what organizational time sinks need to be eliminated and which projects need to be delegated to hit your goals this year.
Right.
But what personal habit, what specific operational task that makes you feel busy but really limits your strategic focus are you willing to break? What comfort zone are you ready to explicitly delegate or delete from your own calendar and your own plate to become the new you required for that success?
Something to mull over.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.